Another day, another totally novel way to look at Bitcoin sentiment data. So I took what is one of my favorite cohorts, which is the smaller accounts, the plebs, so to speak, the people that are relatively newer to Bitcoin. And then I analyzed every single one of the tweets that I have for them through looking at conviction in their language. So basically, how confident are they in the price predictions they're making? How pessimistic or how much are they hedging in their language? And this is represented by the gold and blue bar here. So when it's gold, like it was here, you'll note in the very aggressive run up after the election, that means they're really confident. The language choices they're using are very convicted. And when it's blue, as you'll note in some of the summer chop of 2024, that means they're very much hedged in their language. And it's interesting because you can really watch the times that sentiment changes, and you'll see here the periods that show most clearly when the smaller accounts in Bitcoin flipped. So a couple of the more aggressive ones here are this November election time period, when the vibes went from extremely low conviction to extremely high conviction in a short time period. And this is an incredibly strong counter signal historically. When people get really convicted, it often is signaling of tops. And we'll look forward. After it peaked here, people got very convicted. And then as things prolonged and chopped, the language was much more moderate. And it stayed this way over time until eventually, again, we get to some of the next topping ranges. And you'll see once again, there's very high levels of conviction. This drops off very quickly. This is not what's novel. I've showed this a little bit before. Other people have done this kind of conviction analysis. Hedge funds out there look for people that are anti-signals using this kind of language out there. I wanted to do something a little bit more unique in that I found something cool in a coherence between this conviction language and other kind of moods that I'm tracking. And that's what's shown on the bottom line here that I'm going to expand now. The new section we're looking at here is the optimism of the same group of smaller accounts over time. And what became really interesting to me really quickly on this is the level of coherence between these two things. And it's flashing something really interesting now, but we'll go back in time just a little bit. Way back before the ETF approval, where these smaller accounts had very high levels of conviction, but their optimism generally was pretty low. So what this is insinuating is that it's not necessarily confident in the fact that their Bitcoin price predictions are going to be really positive. Like they're more confident that prices might remain sideways generally, and they were immediately proven wrong. We already looked at the blow off top a little bit after the election where people got very confident, not beforehand, but after it happened, they got disproportionately confident. And you see this tracking again on the lower side with the mood data and the optimism. And it's around these highs and things where people get so confident and so optimistic, kind of in coherence with one another. After this period of time, we drop off, we have lower levels of confidence. Then once again, we do see more conviction as we run up to the highs again. But what came and stuck out to me on this chunk was that we actually saw very low levels of optimism during this high comparatively to the first. And this was like an underlying mood thing that I don't think I personally recognized at the time. Back here, December 2024, end of the year, things were really optimistic. I remember in my own personal feelings about the market being extremely optimistic about where things were going. The same thing when we did break all-time highs here and like towards the end of summer of 2025 and then into October of 2025 when we had our all-time high, you had very low conviction, interestingly, and really high optimism. So although these accounts, these smaller accounts again, were very optimistic, they were hedging a lot still. They were optimistic, but they didn't really use the language that you would normally see with somebody who has a strong belief and strong conviction in that belief. And this happened right around the top, which I found really intriguing, and it's now going to be something I'm watching and tracking much more closely. That brings me to the thing I want to close with today, the most interesting thing and perhaps the most bullish. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer to what's happening right now in the present market. Price recently ran up. We bottomed out at 60K and we've been consistently chopping back upwards. And people are very conflicted right now on Twitter. So I really wanted to look at this one closely to see how these smaller accounts and the plebs are thinking about this. And there's two things happening in tandem with them. So as you'll see here, their net confidence level is actually pretty high. They are quite confident, much more confident than was happening back here at the top. But interestingly, this is coupled with low levels of optimism right here. Actually, some of the lowest levels of optimism we have on record for quite a long time. And this is really unique because this has typically happened closer to bottoms. On Twitter right now, there's a huge amount of these crypto trader accounts that are just convinced that we're in a prolonged bear market and that we're currently in the middle of a dead cat bounce. That was backed up by some of this data where you see very high conviction in these accounts that are very traditionally wrong, and the bulk of them, on average, is much more bearish than normal. To me, I find this to be an incredibly optimistic time for Bitcoin, despite what some of these retail traders are talking about.